All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at how the world might change in the coming years. And we've got two really big contrasting viewpoints from our source material.
Yeah, we're looking at two big theories in international relations.
Yeah.
One is
The end of history.
the end of history,
That's delightful.
and the other is the clash of civilization.
Of civilization.
And
So
these are both...
Let's start with the end of history.
Okay, let's jump into that.
So this end of history thing, it's almost like a political fairy tale.
Yeah, it sounds very utopian.
Right. It's like everyone's going to live.
The idea is basically that liberal democracy is the final form of government.
Liberal democracy.
It's the end point of all of
societal evolution.
histories.
Fukuyama.
Yeah, Francis Fukuyama.
He's the one who
He popularized this idea. And he argues that it satisfies both our need for security and our desire for recognition and freedom as an individual.
Individual freedom as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and how does he think we'll get there?
Well, he draws on this idea called the democratic peace theory.
Democratic peace theory?
Which basically says that democracies rarely, if ever, go to war with each other.
Okay, so democracies are peaceful.
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Got it, but is that the only path to peace?
Well, that's a good question.
And is this end of history thing really as inevitable as Fukuyama suggests?
Well, even Fukuyama acknowledged that the road to the end of history wouldn't be completely smooth.
Okay.
And remember, he was writing this in 1989.
Right, as the Cold War was...
Just as the Cold War is ending. So we've seen a surge in democracy since then.
Yeah.
But there's also been a lot of instability and conflict.
Like what... Well, think about...
Let me an example. The ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia after the collapse of communism.
Oh, yeah.
That was it.
Yugoslavia, that was a mess.
Very violent and tragic episode.
And that wasn't exactly a peaceful transition.
No, not at all.
And what about the rise of these powerful, non-democratic states like China and Russia?
That's a really important point.
They're not exactly lining up to become liberal democracies, are they?
No, they're not.
Especially China.
Especially China.
They seem to be doing pretty well.
They've managed to achieve incredible economic growth under an authoritarian system.
So does that mean that democracy isn't the only path?
Well, it certainly challenges that assumption.
Yeah.
Some scholars, like John Mearsheimer, argue that the world isn't actually becoming this peaceful utopia of democracies.
Okay.
Instead, we're moving towards a multipolar system.
Okay, so multipolar system, just to clarify for our listeners, that basically means that...
Yeah, it means that power isn't concentrated in one state or one block of states. It's spread out among several.
Back in the Cold War, it was the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Exactly. And now it's more complicated. You have the U.S., you have China, you have Russia, you have the European Union.
And that kind of system, historically,
has
been a lot more prone to conflict.
Yeah. Historically, multipolar systems have been more prone to conflict.
So even if democracy is spreading, that doesn't necessarily guarantee a peaceful future.
Exactly.
In fact, some people argue that these authoritarian systems might actually have some advantages when it comes to tackling these huge global challenges.
Yeah.
Like climate change.
Like climate change.
Right.
This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, how so?
Well, proponents of state capitalism
Okay.
argue that systems like China's,
where the government has a lot of control over the economy,
might be better equipped to make the tough long-term decisions.
That are needed to address climate change.
Interesting.
So
think about it.
They can plan for the long term.
Yeah, they can plan for the long term.
Because they don't have to worry about getting reelected every 4 years.
Or appeasing special interest groups. Or things like that. Yeah.
So all this talk about the end of history might be a bit premature.
It might be.
Maybe democracy isn't the inevitable endpoint after all.
Maybe not.
So this raises a big question.
Yeah.
Especially if you're thinking about a career in international relations.
Especially prepping for the UPSC.
If you're a UPSC aspirant.
Is democracy the only viable path to a successful future?
Yeah. Is it the only model? Or are there other models out there?
Or could other models, like state capitalism, prove to be more effective in the long run?
Yeah, that's the question.
Hold on to that thought.
Yeah.
As we dive into the second part. We'll be right back.
Of this deep dive.
With part 2 looking at the clash of civilizations.
All right.
Right.
Okay, so we've explored this optimistic end of history scenario, but now let's flip the script and look at something a bit more confrontational.
Right.
Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations thesis.
Yeah, this is a very different perspective.
Yeah, so what's the basic idea here?
Well, Huntington argues that the main source of conflict in the future won't be ideological or economic.
Okay.
It'll be cultural and religious.
Cultural and religious.
Yeah, he sees the world divided into these major civilizations.
9
major civilizations.
And he predicts that the fault lines between these civilizations will be where we see the most tension and conflict.
He actually said...
Yeah, he had some pretty strong statements about this.
The next world war, if there is one, will be a war between civilizations.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement.
Pretty intense stuff. So what are some of these potential civilizational clashes?
Well, he pointed to several.
One that's gotten a lot of attention is the West versus Islam.
Okay.
Especially after 9/11.
Yeah.
Which many people saw as kind of validating his predictions.
It seemed like, oh, wow, this is exactly what...
Yeah, it seemed to fit it. But he also highlighted the potential for conflict between the West and China, given their very different cultural values and political systems.
So it's interesting that he was writing this back in the early 90s.
Right.
Before China's economic rise really took off.
Yeah, before China became the global power that it is today.
It seems even more relevant now.
Absolutely.
China's growing power, combined with its distinct cultural identity.
Yeah.
It makes it a prime candidate for this kind of civilizational clash.
Right, and remember, this isn't just about military conflict. He argued that these clashes could manifest in economic competition, political rivalry, and even struggles over cultural influence.
So it's like a broader...
It's a broader concept.
Clashing.
Yeah, it's not just about armies fighting each other.
It's about...
But ideas and values.
Yeah, values, systems, ways of life.
But hold on a second.
Yeah.
Isn't it a bit oversimplified to divide the world into these neat little civilizational boxes?
That's one of the main criticisms of Huntington's thesis.
Yeah.
That it kind of paints civilizations with too broad a brush.
Right.
And ignores the diversity and the fluidity of cultures within those supposed blocks.
Cultures aren't static, are they?
No, they're not.
They evolve.
They evolve.
They interact.
They interact.
They borrow from each other.
They borrow from each other constantly.
It's not like every Westerner thinks and acts the same way.
Right.
Just like not every Muslim or every Chinese person fits a single mold.
Exactly.
And haven't there been plenty of historical examples of different cultures and religions coexisting peacefully?
There are countless examples.
Give me some.
Think about the Silk Road.
Oh, yeah.
The transmission of knowledge from the Islamic world to Europe during the Middle Ages.
It's a spread of Buddhism throughout Asia.
These are all examples of
cross-cultural interaction and exchange.
That kind of challenge this notion of civilizations as inherently conflict-prone.
Yeah, they show that it's possible for different cultures to coexist and even to enrich each other.
And what about globalization?
Yes.
Isn't it breaking down these civilizational barriers?
Oh, it's certainly a powerful force.
Creating a more interconnected world.
Yeah.
Where cultures are constantly interacting and influencing each other.
It's leading to a certain degree of cultural homogenization with the spread of Western ideas and values around the globe. But it's also creating a backlash in some parts of the world as people feel like their own cultures and identities are being threatened.
So globalization is a bit of a double-edged sword.
It is.
It could lead to greater understanding and cooperation between cultures.
Right.
But it could also exacerbate tensions and fuel those very civilizational clashes that Huntington warned about.
It's a very complex dynamic.
So we've got these two really powerful forces.
Yeah, globalization on the one hand.
Globalization.
And these civilizational identities on the other.
And it's hard to say which one is going to win out in the end.
It's very hard to predict.
So for our listeners,
yeah,
especially those who are preparing for the UPSC exams,
especially for those folks,
you need to be able to analyze these complex dynamics.
Absolutely.
Weigh the evidence.
Yeah.
And develop your own informed perspectives.
Right, because there's no easy answer here.
So are we headed for a future where cultures clash?
That's the big question.
Or will globalization and interdependence win the day?
It's a question that we all have to grapple with.
This is the question we'll leave you with.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up part 2 of this deep dive. Okay, so we've really gone deep on these two completely different visions of the future. Fukuyama's hopeful end of history and Huntington's more confrontational clash of civilizations.
Yeah, two very influential but also very controversial theories.
It's a lot to think about, right?
It is.
And it's not just some abstract academic debate.
No, these ideas have real-world implications.
These ideas have real-world implications for how countries interact, how conflicts erupt.
Right, and even how we as individuals see the world around us.
So thinking back to Huntington's clash of civilizations, one of the biggest criticisms is that it can be very essentialist.
Yeah, it can lead to that kind of thinking.
Essentialism meaning?
The idea that all members of a civilization share some fundamental, unchanging essence.
It's like saying all Westerners are this way, or all Muslims are that way, or all Chinese are this other way.
Exactly. Those kinds of generalizations are very dangerous.
Because they ignore all the diversity within those cultures.
Right, and they reinforce these harmful stereotypes.
Exactly, and it's important to remember that cultures change over time.
Cultures are dynamic, they're constantly evolving.
The way we understand Western civilization today is very different from how it was understood a century ago.
Absolutely, or even a decade ago.
So if these civilizational categories are so fluid and complex,
Yeah,
how can we predict future conflicts based on them?
that's a great question, and it highlights one of the main challenges of applying Huntington's theory to the real world. It's one thing to point out broad cultural differences,
Right.
but it's another to actually predict how those differences will lead to conflict.
And conflicts usually have many causes, right?
Exactly.
It's rarely just this culture is different, so they're going to fight.
Right. They're usually economic factors, historical tensions, political grievances.
If we try to reduce it all down to just culture,
Yeah.
we might miss some of those other important factors.
You might miss the bigger picture.
Like some people say that all Islamist terrorism is a clash between Islam and the West.
Right.
But if we only focus on that cultural clash,
Yeah.
we might overlook
We might overlook.
the political and economic grievances
Exactly.
that are actually driving people to extremism.
Yeah, it's important to look at the root causes of these conflicts.
So for our listeners,
Yeah.
especially those getting ready for the UPSC exams,
Especially for you folks.
what's the big takeaway here?
I'd say the key is to approach these theories with a critical eye.
Yeah, don't just accept them at face value.
Right. Think about their strengths and weaknesses.
Their blind spots,
Yeah.
how they can be applied or misapplied.
To real-world situations.
Because this isn't just about memorizing facts and figures.
No.
It's about developing critical thinking skills
Yeah.
to analyze these global issues.
Informing your own opinions.
The world's constantly changing.
It is.
These theories we've talked about today,
Yeah.
they give us a framework
A framework for understanding.
for understanding these complex dynamics of international relations.
Exactly.
But it's up to each of us
Yeah.
to stay informed,
Just keep learning.
adapt to new realities, and contribute to building a better future.
Absolutely well said.
So whether you think the future holds peaceful democracies or a clash of civilizations or something totally different, your understanding of these concepts will be super valuable
It'll help you make sense of the world.
as you navigate the challenges and opportunities ahead.
And as you prepare for those UPSC exams,
So keep learning,
keep questioning.
keep engaging with the world.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive,
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
and share it with your friends.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic.
Until then, keep those brains buzzing.